sent you an email, but if you catch me a call. Excuse me.
What's going on? No. Not on mine, anyway.
Is he coming?
Who's absent? We have 8-member president with Mr. LaFrance, Councilman LaFrance, however your dialect tell you what it is. He's absent at this time. At this time, we will stand for the prayer by Mr. Garris and Mr. Russell will lead us in the pledge.
We take this moment to acknowledge Almighty God and thank Him for our bountiful blessings, especially for the parish's natural resources. We pray for the protection of our parish, residents, and businesses during this hurricane season. We give thanks to God for our brave and courageous men and women in our military who daily risk their lives to protect our precious freedom, and we pray for our world leaders to know how to obtain world peace. We also pray that this government body, comprised of both council and administration, will always serve our parish with honesty, humility, and equality to all. And as this government body gathers here today, we pray for the wisdom to know right from wrong and the courage to do that which is right. Amen.
Mr. Russell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2, please.
Item number 2, executive session. There is none. Number 3, status report by the Executive Port Director.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman, members of the board. I am Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District. I have nothing significant to report during this time period of 27 September through 9 October.
Three A.
3A, financial report, budget to actual.
There is no report.
Number 4, bids and advertisements. There are none. Number 5, introduction of ordinances and resolutions.
Cue in if you have any, please. No one have any? Let's move on.
Six A 1, an ordinance authorizing Sandy Sanders, Executive Director of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, to purchase land owned by Regions Bank and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
I offer.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Newberry, Councilman Newberry. Oh, well, wait, I don't have that one.
Yes, you do.
Wait a minute.
Piano key.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I don't.
Piano keys.
I thought I was right. Offer as read. Question from the table? Audience?
I have a question.
I'm sorry.
You're queuing again.
All right, Mr. Russell. Cue in. Penny, you cued in? All right. Mr. Russell?
Oh, yes, thank you. This happens to be is one of the piano keys, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I noticed that when reviewing the documents that we have a real estate agent that's handling this. And could you tell me who that is?
Our real estate agent?
Yes?
Yeah, so we have Patrick Egan as our real estate agent, Ladder and Bloom. You talking about the dual agent in the deal?
David Reese.
Yeah, David Riso.
It's the regions.
And
Regions, what regions?
So we don't need that Patrick Egan in this transaction? Because we're giving permission for this Rizzo to do the transaction on dual agency?
Right. That's correct.
Is there any reason why we don't have a representation in this?
You want to answer that?
I apologize, Mr.
Go ahead.
Let him explain it.
It's on.
Yeah, the sale price met the appraised value, and so there was no need to really have for this, what we, as everybody knows, we refer to as a piano key, any representation on that. Regions had their agent, and so we felt comfortable that he could handle the transaction.
Okay, and is this the first piano key that we've purchased?
It's the first individually, Mr. Roussel, but it was, if you recall, on track, what we call track 3, which was the Woodlands Borrow Pit transaction that we did on 1 and 3. They owned a few of those piano keys, so that was part of the bigger transaction, but you are correct that this is the first individual piano key.
And the reason I bring that up, because we hired Mr. Pat Egan like 4 years ago to purchase piano keys. And the reason that this one is being purchased is because it's coming out of an estate, and the guy died. And so I'm wondering, are we making any progress on the other piano keys after 4 years?
Yes.
So when do you anticipate that we will see some of that?
I would think at the next meeting, there'll be another introduction for a piano key that has been handled by Mr. Egan's office, and maybe another one after that immediately.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments from table? Audience? Machine is open. Passes 9-0. I'd like to offer the next ordinance with changes.
6A2, an ordinance to amend and as amended readopt ordinance number 07-102, adopted May 10, 2007, to establish and initiate the collection of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District security fees and otherwise to provide with respect thereto.
Would you read the changes, please? Online.
The
Go ahead.
changes are on line 15 and line 61, where we're changing October to November. So the effective date will be November 1st, 2019.
Wait, I think we have a different, I have a different number here. You said 15? On the original, I have 21 on the amendment.
Okay, line number 21 and line number 69.
I offer with those changes. Second by Mr. Councilman Goulet. Question from the table?
Mr. President,
Mr. LaFrance?
are these race competitive in this region?
They're actually more. All right. They're very competitive compared to Port of New Orleans, St. Bernard, South Louisiana, and Baton Rouge. It's significantly lower than those parishes. We could actually double or triple our rates and still be competitive with those ports.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Audience? Machine is open. Passes 9-0. We're going to defer B and D. We'll move to C.
C, an ordinance to amend the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District manpower structure to create the classified position of Director of Port Finance and otherwise provide with respect thereto.
Offer as read. Seconded by Councilman Black. Second by Councilman Black. Questions from the table? Audience? I'm sorry, Mr. Roussel. Mr. Roussel
Yes,
and Ms. Newberry.
we're creating a position, and we're going to a grade 41. There's no other position in parish government that has a pay grade this high.
There's two of them.
There's two. Well, There are two positions at the Port of Plaquemines that are at that grade already. The Director of Administration and the Director of Security and Vessels, Christy Nielsen and Donald Durr respectively. This position would be Director of Finance, which we're transitioning from Comptroller, which would be equal to those roles.
Okay, I guess I'll repeat my statement. There are no positions at this grade in parish government. I'm glad you recognize that you're part of parish government today for this purpose. We have our Director of Finance that is at the highest grade of a 38. So this sets up another scenario for the port employees to be at higher pay grades than the parish government pay grades. And it's a trend that has happened, and I'm hoping that we don't continue this, because if you look at the work that the Superintendent of Finance does for the Plaquemines Parish government, we have over 500 employees. You have 45 in the port. The bookkeeping and the accounting is nowhere near the workload that our finance superintendent has. So I haven't seen any workload increase in the port to be able to justify going up to a maximum salary of $124,000, which this pay grade would be pushing. So that's just my comments. And, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. Another situation is we have our internal auditor, who has a long list of credentials. He's a CPA. He has a long history of auditing work. His salary is nowhere near the current salary that we're talking about increasing. So I don't justify, in my mind, the increase in salary when the current position is paying $73,000. Just my opinion. I wanted to voice it, and I'll vote accordingly.
Newberry?
Yes, I had a conversation with you the other day, and you asked for my support, Paul. So, and when you asked me, I was looking at the ordinance, and I wasn't prepared for it. So I thought that her salary, as it stated, she was making a minimum salary of below the $68,000. So I gave you my support on it. So doing a little research, I'm not aware, as Mr. Roussel is, very familiar with the civil service plan and how it operates. So what I did, I reached out to our civil service department, Ms. Rochelle, and she sent me a booklet on a pay scale. And my concern was, so I called our finance manager and I asked him what his pay scale was, because it states here in section 1 of the ordinance that to move her to Director of Port Finance on a pay grade of 41. Mr. Tommy his pay grade is, I think you had said 37 or 37. And Mr. Tommy has been here over 30 years. Shimbrell has been here 3. My point is, it's not a direct to her, but looking at it from a whole, our parish has been begging and asking for raises, and then y'all come to us asking for raises. So at this moment, I cannot support this. It's something I may be able to support in the future. I think she's at a good rate right now, and I think if you come to us next year and we can maybe look at the port's grade scale and we can all come together and talk about what levels y'all expect that y'all port to be on. I did a little research on the average. The lowest average salary as a port director is $67,000, so I think she's on an average scale right now on where she's at. So as of right now, I can't go ahead and give her a raise without giving our own parish finance manager a raise, and it's just not right. So it just, so there, I don't support the raise as of right now. I yield.
Any comments from the table?
I just want to say on behalf of our team, we believe that Ms. Riley Williams has done an incredible job for the port. We believe that moving her into this role of Director of Finance changes her role fully, not just for day-to-day Bean County, but to be as a Director of Finance, to serve in a greater role of looking at the long-term vision financially of the port, as she has been involved in negotiations of prior deals and projects. We are looking at her position and her value as someone with an MBA, someone with a CPA, and has served this port for more than 7 years. She has worked hard and been diligent, and this is a role that is appropriate for her, and we do believe that this rate is comparable to that position. That is our position, and we think that she has done a yeoman's job in her role. And I sit here and agree that Mr. Sanders and the rest of our staff support what we're asking for today. And we ask that we put her in a position that she has earned, and it's a position that the port needs long-term at that rate.
I would like to add to that. As the executive director, we have talked about this position many times. Sean Brell has been involved in a lot of our negotiations. She's kept us straight. That is probably the one part of the port that's going to be expanding greatly. She has proven her worth both academically and professionally, and I highly support this raise.
Any more comments from the table?
First, I would like to say thank you for the consideration in reviewing the current legislation on the table. Mr. Roussel has mentioned and compared my position to the finance manager position in the parish. And you are correct, Mr. Roussel. He's at that current grade, and I'm at my current grade as well. I think what we do not recognize or may have not analyzed and looked into is the structure of the two different government agencies. Mr. Tommy Serpaz does a a great job doing what he does, and I feel like I do a great job at doing what I have done for this port. Mr. Serpaz has a payroll department, an accounts payable department. He has an accounts receivable department. He has a purchasing department. The port does not have that. The port has Shambrell, the comptroller, and it has a couple of accounts receivable clerks that does a good job as well. But at the port, my role, my position takes on more than just overseeing a staff of more than 10 employees. So my duties and my responsibilities differ much from Mr. Serpaz. So when doing those comparisons, it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. Ms. Trudy, I have been here for about 8.5 years now. I worked for the port when they were still being administered by the government as a senior accountant. I was promoted to comptroller in 2013 when all of those accounting duties and responsibilities were transferred to me, Shambrell, as the comptroller, and no longer working as an employee or a department under Mr. Serpaz. So the structure has changed, the responsibilities have changed, the duties have changed, and I think it's only fair that the position, the title, and the pay changes as well.
Thank you, Shambrell, and I don't think it's anything to do with the quality of work that you do. You know, we appreciate the quality of work you do. But for instance, you mentioned a payroll department. Well, the port contracts its payroll department out. It just contracted out the checks and somebody else processes the paperwork.
Well, Mr. Roos, I'm sorry.
So, without getting into the minutia of this situation, if you would have come to us and said you wanted a finance manager and you would have went to an equal grade of 38 or something that wouldn't exceed the payroll of the finance department, which I personally believe has a lot more responsibility and a lot more duties and functions than the port has in the case of where we stand today. In the future, when we have some expansion, and we're looking forward to that, and the duties expand beyond that, then, we can reassess the situation. It's just my position that I know what Mr. Surpass does, and it shouldn't come to a personality situation. It come to a duty situation. And I believe that the duties that the Finance Department in the Plaquemines Parish government have and the responsibilities they have are much greater than what the port has. Just the mere fact that you have 45 employees versus 500 employees. Those are the type of things that, just like you have, I don't want to really keep digging into this. My point is I can't support the position at that higher pay grade.
Can I ask, what is the current salary of the finance manager at this time, and where is that placed on the current pay scale?
He's at the top of the rung of 38, and the exact salary is probably a little over 100. He's been here over 30 years. You're at 73, trying to go to 79, and eventually to 124.
After how many years does it take to get to the 124, sir?
I guess it would be, I don't know, probably 30 years. The point is, it's a higher pay grade.
Councilman Black?
Yeah, I'm going to support this legislation because I think we, as I said before, Mr. Sanders' contract, we get what we pay for. I think comparing one position in one agency to another isn't really fair. I think we talked about two separate things, as you alluded to before, apples and oranges. If we did those comparisons, we'd be out here all day kind of micromanaging this whole thing. But, hopefully this doesn't discourage you if it does fail from looking for outside employment. I can tell you, as I told Mr. Sanders before, I wouldn't blame you if you did. I'm sure there's a lot of private organizations and businesses and probably other ports that would love your services and what you do. I know you work hard every day, so thank you for that. And with that, I'll be supporting this legislation. And then if there's legislation on the government side to increase Mr. Surpass's salary, I think he deserves it as well. So I would support that. Thank you.
Table, any more comments? Audience?
The Henry Bell case. Hey, Colonel, support. I gotta agree with you, Mr. Black. I've been watching this young lady for many years. She was always on cue. She did her work. She qualified. Pay the lady. With Tommy, I love Tommy. Y'all gotta pay Tommy more. When it comes to paying Tommy, pay Tommy. But right now, this lady deserved that amount of money. She deserved it. It's time to stop downing some of these people that we did that in the last administration. Hey, give this lady what she deserved. Give her her pay. Thank you.
Any other comments? Audience? Machine is open. It passes 6 2 noes, and 1 abstention. Next item, please.
D has been deferred. 7, new business. B, discussion of inquiry. Commissioner Blink.
As commissioners of the Plaquemines Port Harbor and Terminal District, we have an obligation to do the right thing. Whenever there is the illusion of impropriety, we must act to right that. Ultimately, our port and economy will be stronger when we have strong ethical guidelines in place to guide port leadership in the decision-making process. What I'm about to share with you are several key missteps made by our port to secure a land transaction for the Plaquemines Liquid Terminal. What I'm looking for are explanations around why this transaction happened this way. And in order to have a true pro-business environment, decisions of the highest ethical level should be made at every step. No one project is too important to bypass doing the right thing. To prevent anything like this from happening ever again, I'm requesting recommendations following the below questions from port staff to improve policies so the best decisions can be made, which have a strong ethical foundation and avoid the appearance of impropriety. The reputation of the port and the parish are of the utmost importance. In good faith, earlier this week, I've asked the port staff to be prepared to answer these questions. First slide, please. Go to 2, please. Thank you. So, why seek out an appraiser to provide a higher appraiser for the property the port is buying? So, in regard to the PLT deal, there was a Freedom of Information Act request that was slapped on my desk earlier last week that I've been really scratching my head around and trying to figure out what to do about it. There has been so many questions in my head, and the optics of the nature of the transaction are so questionable. I feel like the best thing to do is to turn the light on and put them in light of day. This email up here is from a port consultant asking how to extract $5 million in soft costs from the process. Next slide, please. This email here is describing how there's a need to get the appraisal for that property up from $24.5 million, from $24 million up to $30.5 million. The next slide, please. Certainly. Back, please. Oh. Okay, there we go. This is from Mr. Rathburn to Paul. We need a term sheet, and we need it for at least a month. That remains, in my opinion, the root of 90% of the misunderstandings. I believe its absence was used by Eric, Mark, Chris as a way to say, oh, well, we've been progressing with the understanding that the port will be okay with, and something's omitted there. We need an appraiser who can get the appraisal from $24 million up to $30.5 million. Eric has assured me he's working on it and will have some names for me, hopefully next week. After the term sheet, we need to flesh out the detail of the land lease, meaning how the port gets paid. We need to establish who gets paid from revenues and what priority. They want to have the pilot payments, port lease payments, take a back seat to bond payments. Somebody better get that clear with the council now, not later, because the council, at least from my perspective, is thinking the pilot payments will be the like and take the same priority as ad valorem taxes. As you can see from the email I copied you to bond counsel, I asked her to weigh in on this because I wanted her perspective and not tell me, and not me telling you what her perspective was. In closing, I may be overstepping, but I'm going to lay my opinion on the line for you and ask that you share it with Sandy. Mark, Eric, and yes, even Chris, do you have the best interests, do not have your best interests as job number one. Further, they believe they have the port desperate for a win. I say this as a lead into my final observation. You note that ultimately, you want to see this project done. I urge you and Sandy to honestly self-reflect and ask yourselves at what price. If the answer is any, you then need to ask yourselves an additional question. Should the port be paying Ken Rathburn to work on this file? That's me being as honest as I know how to be, because the answer likely should be no. And that's certainly not in my self-interest to say that. Regards, Ken. Next slide, please. And this is from Paul Matthews. Over to a financier. Eric, you previously mentioned having an appraiser that will be able to give us an appraisal that justifies the purchasing price. Where are we at on that? Next slide, please. All right. These next few questions center around why a third party donated the deposit of $100,000 in the purchase agreement for this ultimately $30 million piece of property via personal check that was sent via FedEx. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, back one, Julia. Okay. We will get it to you. We'll get it directly wired your way, Chris. Ken, as I've spoken to Mark, we are clear to take the easiest and shortest route to return to the deposit. Sorry, y'all. and shortest route to return to the deposit to LA 23. Please advise when you need wiring instructions. Next slide. Based on the conversations that you call V and Eric had, I'm not sure why that's something's omitted there. As we understand it, a member of Drexel Hamilton Investment Capital Fund, I can provide the deposit funds. I understand you and Eric have extensive conversations as to the technical issues on this wire transfer by Drexel Hamilton. That said, I'm assuming it will be a personal check unless Mark has an alternative. And then at the bottom here from Mr. Rathburn, it must be issued by Monday. Sounds like alternative 2. But what type of check is he lying about? Next slide, please. Ken, this is from Chris Fetters. Ken, I just got off the phone with Mark and have an understanding of the situation, potential alternatives to manage. Below are 3 options I see in order to meet the deadline given the current status of the Drexel Hamilton account. Mark, can I initiate the wire on Monday in the afternoon as a member of Drexel Hamilton Investment Capital Fund? It will show as initiated, but likely will be received on Tuesday, so we need clarity on the alternative if it's allowable. Mark, can FedEx as check to be received by the escrow agent on Monday? I could rewire the money directly to escrow agent noted on behalf of Drexel Hamilton Investment Capital Fund 1. Please advise the best option to meet the expectations of the purchase agreement. I'm traveling by plane the rest of the afternoon. We'll only have access to email. Next slide. Pursuant to our phone conversation, please confirm receipt of FedEx regarding the 100,000K deposit. Also, I agree that we should have the respective engineers work through the issues of documentation. I wait further word from you on that. Thanks, Ken. Next. So there's a few questions I have here and want some clarity to. The first one is, why would we seek out to pay $5 million more for a piece of property the port is trying to purchase? And I'll stop with that one, and then we can go into some of those other details.
Thank you, Mr. Blink. First of all, I want to make very clear, if you see something that you think is unethical, then I think you have a duty and an obligation to report it. So, again, thank you for bringing this up. This is your first step. Also, our answers to your questions are going to be as accurate as we were given the time to prepare. You turned down our request by our attorney to do this at the next meeting so we could prepare as well as you did. That being said, we think we can answer all your questions to satisfaction. On the first email, you talk about a $5 million extraction. Now, if you look at the email, I can see where you might scratch your head. But to give you some color on this, this is what this deal was about, the Plaquemines Liquid Terminal. This project is of strategic importance. And when I say that, we are in competition with really the entire state of Texas, particularly 2 ports, Houston and the Port of Corpus Christi. As you have probably read in many accounts, our strategic national policy has changed from one being an import petroleum nation to a total export petroleum nation. With all the shale formations that have come online, many pipelines have been reversed. Instead of importing oil, they're starting to reverse. The Loop is also trying to do this. This project, be it the PLT or the one going on Corpus Christi, that will probably happen too because of their proximity to the Eagle Ford Shale, and to Houston. Probably one port can't handle all of it, but all these ports are being considered. This is a project that I shouldn't do this, but I'm assuming that you got all your information from Kendall Dix and his associates who have been against this project. This is the same Kendall Dix that looked at Mr. Matthews and me in the face last time when he came to a port meeting and said, in so many words, my reason for life is to make sure this PLT project does not go forward. And that's due to where he sits. He's environmentalist, and that's his business. This project, be it the PLT or be it an export facility, is going to go forward.
this natural resource that we have is going to find a port. It will be exported. This particular project was asked by the governor of the state, what do you think of this project? And the COO of the project company told the governor, this is going to be the largest petroleum export facility, not in America, but in the Western Hemisphere. So this project is really going to put not only our little community and port on the map, it's going to have huge dividends for the state. Now, why do I say all that? I say that to give you color in that when we were dealing with this, when this project was brought to us, it had also been offered to another company prior to that. That company, I won't get into all of it, but in essence, they turned it down 3 times, wanting more money. It was brought to us, and I looked at it on a number of conditions. First, I didn't have any money. All the money that I've been saving in my land piggy bank was going towards a container facility, which is, and we have received advance payments from our client Venture Global, but that money had strings attached. That money goes toward a property purchase, port improvement on what they call the industrial campus, which is parcels 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Knowing that, so one of my things was I don't have the money to pay for this. I don't even have money for attorney's fees, permitting, etc. If y'all want to do this with the port, I'm going to require a couple of things. One, I want to have proof that any agreement that you had with the prior company has run its course. Second of all, if there's money to be paid, if the port has to pay it in advance, we expect it to be reimbursed. Now, on this particular email, we have Bob Stevens, who is a port consultant. Bob Stevens has
Sam, can you just pause for 1 second so we can go back to the email, the $5 million in soft costs?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah. Okay, all the guys on the board know Bob Stevens, but for the benefit of the crowd, Bob Stevens has worked with the port. He was at the port before I got here. His company Trident. They put together our strategic plan, and they also helped us negotiate the different projects that we were getting into. He's been doing this for over 40 years. Also, I guess to caveat all of this is we're doing a forensic on us, as we say, making sausage. We're putting a deal together. Anytime you put a deal together, even if it's just a car buying deal, people get cross. There's winners and losers. But a good deal is when it's good for the seller and it's good for the buyer. So what we're doing is we're explaining a lot of our back and forth internally of how we're going to put this deal together. We are trying to get the best deal, and here I am, hat in hand with no money. All right. Bob Stevens has recognized the strategic importance of this deal.
So how does extracting the $5 million of soft
I'm getting to that, Mr. Blink. Give me some time. You threw this on us on Monday afternoon. I'm trying to give you, the board members, and everyone in the audience who obviously is here to hear this. So Bob Stevens understands we don't have money. Whatever property we go after to do this, there's going to be a tremendous amount of engineering, permitting, a lot of soft costs. His thought process was, what we should probably try to do first is go after the property that the first company was using, if they do indeed do not have this deal. And then with the investors, his thought process was we need to ask them for soft cost money. That soft cost money is what this $5 million extraction is. That soft cost money would go, if the port were going to this deal, it's just like buying a house. The seller pays the closing costs. And we're negotiating back and forth who's going to pay the closing costs. You probably bought a house before, and either you paid the closing costs or the other party did. So this is a negotiation that we're using, that we're not going to get hung up with the closing costs. We need the money to get this deal done. We don't have the money to do this deal. So we're going to ask up to $5 million of soft costs, that if we get this deal, then that would be given to us to do the things that were required of the purchaser, i.e. the permitting, the engineering, etc. So to look at that email and take it out of context, yeah, it looks ugly, but that's the color of it. And that $5 million extraction is us making sausage, working with the investors. We're going to ask them, if this deal was so important, we're going to ask you to put skin in the game, put up soft money. This is the exact same thing we're doing right now with the carrier. We're asking them to put skin in the game because the port does not have money to pay for these costs.
Councilman Blink.
Could you yield for a question while we're on this subject?
Go ahead. You yield to Roussel, Mr. Roussel?
Just for a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I understand you talk about this as a soft cost in the deal, but in the sale, it went to Ram Terminal. So where's the $5 million soft cost breakdown? Where's the cash?
There wasn't any cash yet. No, we sent expenses that we had to them, and they were reimbursed.
ELT.
Yeah, but we never received any upfront $5 million.
So I'm trying to make an understanding of what we packed into the deal with the higher appraisal for $5 million. You said it was for engineering, permits, and all of those items. So did we expend those $5 million on soft cost of permits, engineering, and so forth?
That $5 million was not part of the appraisal. That was an ask that we were thinking about internally to ask them, can you pay the soft costs up to $5 million? In many of these large deals, again, one pending right now, we have a firm that's willing to put up $20 million in soft costs.
I'm still trying to understand the transaction.
We're talking two different, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but we're talking two different things. We're not talking about an appraisal. We're talking about if an investor wants us to do this and that project is that much work to them, we're going to see if you can pick up the cost that normally the port would pick up.
And I would expect that on any deal that an individual investor wants to do, he could pick up those costs and part of his project.
Well, but we need to make sausage. We need to talk about that.
Sausage ain't coming out in the tube. This situation here, I'm understanding that we had an appraiser from our own appraiser who has a contract with the port and is on our payroll at $24,500,000. That we go out and we shop for another appraiser, as Mr. Blink's presentation shows, to get us up to $30,500,000. So that $5 million gap in there is what you just explained as being soft cost.
No, two different things. The appraisal comes up in another email, and we can hold your question for that, or we can address right now. But what he's referring to in the $5 million soft cost process is, for one, our expenses were sent in and reimbursed, but we did not get $5 million up front. Did not.
So it reads to me, they want this bad. We need to extract something like $5 million soft costs. And I haven't got an explanation of what that $5 million represents when we, in the beginning of the deal, had an appraisal from the government, the port, for $24,500,000. Why wasn't that offer submitted to RAM for the purchase? Instead of going through this other routine of saying we got to get the cost up and the appraisal up to cover the soft cost.
All right. We're talking two different emails.
Well,
I'm talking about right now the $5 million extraction. If you want to go jump to the other one, we can do that.
I think I'd like to stay right here for right now.
Okay. All right. But this $5 million, to be clear, it was an internal back and forth between us and our consultant, who has been in many of these mega deals, and it's like, let's see where they are. Let's see if they can pick up some of the soft costs that we, the port, would normally have to eat.
So Sandy, I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned, an outside party to this. And the thing is, I have no obligation to any other group. My obligation is to the people of Plaquemines Parish. And when any sort of impropriety is alluded to or mentioned to, especially with 300 pages of supporting documentation, I absolutely have to, move forward and bring that to the light of day. When there's things, there's two sentences in this email. And the first one is, this email is a dangerous email from a freedom of information perspective. We don't want anybody to see this. And what my opening statement centered around was making sure we are making the most ethical decisions that will look good in the light of day. That's what we're talking about today.
It was dangerous only in that if the investor knew that we were discussing this, they would be going, I don't know if we can put up 5. It is dangerous in that for freedom of information that they know they can see our hand in what we're trying to do to negotiate. That's where he's referring to. And as a matter of fact, I called Mr. Stevens on this right before I came here. Mm-hmm. And he said that's exactly right.
And for additional clarity, this is not about the project. This is about ethical decision-making and optics. So we'll go ahead and move to the next item here. Next item on this. Keep moving forward, Julia, please. All right. So FedExing the personal check. After that. All right. So I don't know if this is just, poor business, or what, but there was a $30 million deal. The deal was in the process of falling apart. It seemed like the financiers did not have an adequately formed corporation. Either way, somebody had to send a personal check via FedEx as a deposit on a $30 million land deal. What went into that? Where was the ball drop? Why did that kind of thing have to happen? And what kind of policy recommendations do you have in place where we're only going to do very clear and transparent wire transfers in the future?
Okay. Mr. Blink, again, for context, the Drexel Hamilton was the party we were dealing with, the council members that were here when this transaction was put together will remember that. They were forming another company, Drexel Hamilton, let's just say 2, to deal specifically with this project. And when that deposit became due, the main driving force behind all of this was the port will not be out a single penny. The port won't expose itself to any cost that it can't recover. It won't do it. That was my marching order from Sandy and what he had discussed with the council members, that we would not be out any money. So what happened was they didn't have the money right then, but all of these investors, the people that were dealing with this, whether it was ultimately what turned into PLT, LA23, Drexel Hamilton, all of these folks had the funds available, but they couldn't get it into that banking account. They were trying to set up the banking account. So it wasn't that this transaction in any shape, fashion, or form at this point was in danger of going away. We were in contact with the seller, and we were arranging for having the monies deposited with the seller that was required. But there was no threat. You won't find anything, including any of these emails, where they were like, well, if y'all don't get that $100,000 to us by X, this deal's going away. I was in contact with the other side, and we were trying to decide what's the best way to get the $100,000 over. We decided FedEx. That is not unusual. Wiring is, you're right, it's turned into a more traditional use in recent times, but there's nothing unusual about the FedExing of funds, and I cleared it with the other side, the landowner's representative, and I said, look, we'll get that FedEx to you. Is that okay? They said, fine. That's what happened.
So, Mr. Rathburn, just for clarity, The check came from who, and who was the deposit returned to?
The same party that it came from, it went back to. And that's what the agreement called for, that we could direct whatever the funds were that were going to be put in, we could direct where they went to, and that's what the agreement said. And they were returned to, ultimately, I think it was Mr. Fetters with LA 23, if I recall correctly.
So the deposit monies came from Drexel Hamilton. They sat at the port for a bit to hold the piece of land, and then they were returned to LA 23?
No, there was no deposit given to the port. It went to the seller of the property to hold as a good faith deposit pending the transaction. And if the transaction didn't go through, all of our stuff always says subject to council approval.
Sure.
And if it didn't go through and the council said, no, we don't like this deal, the $100,000 was to be returned. And if the deal did go through, then the monies in total for the price of $30.5 million would be paid, and the deposit, the good faith deposit, returned, and that's what happened.
So in this email here dated November 8th, where this is, let's see who this is coming from, Chris Fetters, I've spoken to Mark. We are cleared to take the easiest and shortest route to return the deposit to LA 23. Please advise when you need wiring instructions. So did the money go back to him?
Yes.
Okay. So it
They
went to LA
deposited-
23 after it came from the initial financier? It went from the financier to the landholder, which was RAM, and then to LA 23, is that correct?
Yes.
Got it.
It went from LA 20, forgive me. It went from, at the time, this was when the closing occurred, the actual sale took place. And so there was the $100,000 that was still on deposit, but the full price had been paid. And as the contract called for, tell me where to return it. That's what happened. We returned it to the same person that deposited the funds.
Okay, I just, want to clear up what's in black and white here.
Yes, sir.
If something else happened.
No.
And, again, to tie everything together, solid decisions based on just ethical decision-making practices to where we're not having to do this ever again. And I'm requesting policy recommendations to prevent this from happening.
I apologize to you, Mr. Blank. I don't know what we're preventing from happening. I think this was a great deal. It was a good transaction. And if anything, the port should be complimented on getting this without putting any of its money at risk. So I don't know what is wrong with this. I haven't seen you saying anything that was actually wrong with this transaction.
So here, where Mr. Sanders is saying, this continues to be rinky-dink. I hope I don't have to apologize to you. I got you mixed up in this. But I am past the worry stage with whom I got involved. If Drexel Hamilton is so arduous at this, why is this amateur hour? Philip, I will resign before I lose my job over this. I am trying to remain cool, but this is the Keystone Cops. My board would take me to task on this, and I'm getting wary over this. I mean, is this an okay transaction? Is this your idea of a good transaction where the head of the port is worried about to quit his job because it's getting so bad?
Absolutely. Look, this is the thing. When you're negotiating, you can pick one email out of any over that this thing took place over, a year's time? There's going to be tension, giving back and forth. This was the dynamic of negotiations going on because what had happened, I can give you some context. I'll let Mr. Sanders speak for himself. But what had happened was I had been complaining. I complained that the other side wasn't providing us documents on a timely basis so that we could get them to the council or the board. They were expecting us to push the deal forward, meaning the investors, and they weren't providing me timely documents that had been promised to me to review. So I was complaining, and we were having some friction between me and the other side, meaning the investors, and Sandy finally had to step in and tell everybody, get your house in order so we can get this deal done, and that's what that represents.
Sure. Back one slide.
If I may, Commissioner Blank, go back to that slide. Again, we're making sausage. I'm getting frustrated. Other side's getting frustrated. And I had Ken being the point man on quite a few of the negotiations. And it got to be somewhat disrespectful. Kim was continually coming up to me and saying, you know, that they don't think I'm a big boss or whatever, that you have blessed me to do this. So I, as the leader, had to do this many times in the Army. You're looking like you're not interested in what I'm having to say.
I am very, very much interested.
Okay.
Very disappointed.
All right. So then I had to shake it up. I had to talk to the group that we were dealing with, and I had to let them know that this is my attorney, and when he says something, you act like it's coming from me. I also, at one point, had to take Ken out because he is reaching diminishing returns. He was getting very frustrated. And again, inside baseball, I had to relieve the pitcher. I put Paul in charge. And I said, everything that goes through now is going to have to go through Paul, and then Paul will direct Ken. So again, just to tighten up the folks that are on our team, but again, we're going back and forth, and it was frustrating. I had due outs that I had to give to the board. They were expecting things from me. I was not getting them on a timely matter. And then on many occasions, when I would finally get it, you know, Ken's prophecy came true. He goes, I know, y'all going to give it to me all on Friday and tell me you need it tomorrow. So there was a lot of frustration in that. You don't get that from these emails. All you're doing is cherry picking an email. You look somewhat frustrated too when I'm trying to give you explanation.
I'm very frustrated.
Okay, so you understand how these things can be frustrating. And they were to me, and hence that email. You ever been in a big deal where you have to put one of these together, a multi-million-dollar deal? They don't happen in an afternoon. They happen over a very long period of time, and both sides are negotiating inside and outside. And, you know, you got to keep your eye on the ball. You got to keep your team in line, and you got to recognize when you need to make changes. And that's what I did.
I hear you very clear when
Thank you.
there's the need to realize that it's time to make some changes, for sure.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. From here on out, whatever kind of emails y'all are writing, no matter how much how much sausage y'all are grinding in there, you really need to know that these are subject to the public's view at all times, and that we're going to hold ourselves to a very high ethical standard, where there's no email that's going to be cherry picked. Nothing's going to look bad, because we're going to do business the right way, and we're going to sleep well at night, and we're not going to be in a rush, because we have abundant natural resources.
I think we're in violent agreement on that. I agree with you, Mr. Blunt. Yes, sir. Okay. Sorry.
Because we have an abundant natural resources, a very strategic place at the very mouth of the river with no overhead obstructions and very deep water, and people naturally want to come here. We are in charge of time in this regard. Next. We don't need to beat the drum about some of the internal dysfunction next slide, please.
What internal dysfunction, Mr. Blink?
We just covered that. The executive director worrying about resigning.
I was getting frustrated with him.
Those types of things. Next slides, please. So, to tie it together, Sandy had misgivings, you had misgivings, and it,
Take your time, Rick.
anyway, this just ties us together. This is another stumbling block. We can't get through this kind of thing. We'll go on to the next slide, please. We don't need to beat the dead horse. We talked about this. Look, I want to tie this together because I want to maintain the honor of the port. To do that, we need to make sure everybody is doing the right thing when no one is watching. We have a strategic position and abundant natural resources. People want to come here to do business. We need to know our worth and never be too desperate to make unethical decisions or even the decisions that have the illusion of impropriety. to attract business. Moving forward, I would like to see Port staff to develop a decision-making framework for this commission to build into policy so we never have to read an email asking, quote, to extract $5 million in soft costs ever again. This commission will not tolerate any unethical behavior moving forward, and doing the right thing and building a world-class port are not two mutually exclusive things. Thank y'all for your cooperation in this matter, and I hope we can begin to move forward with a renewed sense of ethics. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Blank.
Councilman Goy?
Mr. Sanders, Mr. Matthews, Mr. Rathburn, I want to thank you for your work. Your answers today, I appreciate them. I understand that the port is a business, and being as a business, in making sausage, as you say, to make a business come to fruition, there's a lot of negotiation. That negotiation becomes public, you lose your bargaining chip. And I understand that. Keeping this board advised is what we should do. But there are times, and I understand that during these heated negotiations, that the focus is to make this deal right and to do the right and the ethical thing. And I believe in my heart that you've always done that. And I appreciate that as a member of the board and as a taxpayer in Clackamas Parish. There's a lot of emails that went out today that appear to be from the port attorney. Where is the line on attorney-client privilege, and when do we make sure we don't cross that, Mr. Rathburn?
Yes, sir. Of all the ones that Mr. Blink provided, I guess it's in the neighborhood of 300 pages of documents, there was only one that was attorney-client privilege, because anytime I or Danny, as an attorney, includes someone other than the client in an email, it's no longer attorney-client privilege. And so when we get these public records requests, I would never, just because my name's on it, say, don't turn it over. We do turn it over because that's the legal thing to do with the public records request. There was one that was sent by me to Paul and Sandy, and I think Mr. Blink went through it I didn't get a chance to really read it out, but that one was apparently a slip up with the port IT department, okay? It got through, and I missed it because this FOIA request that we got, we call it FOIA, it's actually a public records request. FOIA is the federal statute on that. There were thousands of documents that we had to decide, well, are they responsive or are they not? So I missed a one-page email. I should have caught that, actually, but I didn't. And the IT department didn't catch it because the only thing that we do exclude are those things that are completely attorney-client privileged, which are the same as if the council sends me an email and I send it to the council only, I would expect that the council, if it chose to, could say that's attorney-client privilege. So you'll know. If it's an outside party, though, if I CC'd Bob Stevens, if I CC'd Chris Fetters, Mark Michelle, or whatever, that is not what I consider, nor do I believe the law considers attorney-client privileged anymore.
I appreciate that. That's a lot more than I asked for.
I apologize.
And I'm sure the audience would appreciate more brevity.
Okay.
So I will be brief. There's been some discussion about policies, and I certainly hope that we look and take Mr. Blink's comments seriously about policies, and if there are things we can do to tighten up our policies, let's do that. And if there's any suggestions from any of the board members, I'd like you to, pass them around so we could take a look at that. Other than that, good job, and I appreciate your time.
Mr. Konovich?
Yeah, I got, we bought the property from Ram, right?
Yes, sir.
So our realtor does an appraisal and does it 23.5 million, I think it was, say 24. Why did we want an appraisal to be higher at 30.5 million? If I'm buying the property,
Right.
I want the lowest I could pay for.
And believe me, we would love to have the lowest, but they were going to pay money for it, and RAM either had to accept it or not accept it. Right away when we got that back, even we looked at it and we just said, this ain't going to fly. We shared it with our team. Everyone agreed they're not going to accept this.
How do we know? Did they say no to
Send it out there.
4 million?
Go ahead, Ken.
We actually asked if, I think what we spoke to them about, one, they told us what they were saying was firm. Of course, they came off of it a couple of $1 million and lowered it out. But we talked to them and asked them if they would, we wanted to say, well, would you take in the 20s somewhere? And they just flatly refused. They would not sell it for any less than what they ultimately sold it for, and they did that begrudgingly. They just weren't going to sell it for that price.
Being a government buying a property, if it's appraised for 24 million, and they declined it, all we got to do is expropriate, and all we could pay is 24 million, and that's what you're getting.
But Mr. Kognovich, if you do that, you better have 24 million in the bank when you go and expropriate it, because you got to put that money into the court at the time you begin the expropriation process. So you better be willing to call that particular item. I get what you're saying, but the port certainly didn't have $24 million.
Tallgrass had it. That's where you got the 30.5, huh?
I'm sorry?
Tallgrass give you the 30.5?
Yeah, but they didn't.
Wouldn't they be willing to pay less?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't they be willing to pay less?
Only if they were sure it was going to turn out that way. Just because you put up 24.5 with an appraisal that everyone agrees, everyone that looked at it, other than the appraiser, said that's low, then no, you're going to get another appraiser to come in at the price that we think was the right price. And let's back off just a second if we could. The 30.5 million that was ultimately paid, the appraisal that we got was a 31.9. The 30.5 that was ultimately paid was paid by a willing party that is now the investor in all of this. They put up all the money. The port didn't put up any of it. Who are we to, if we get an appraisal that says it's worth 30.5, they're going to put up, without us having to ever pay back a penny of it. And all the parties, the business people that are doing that, say that's a valid price. Why wouldn't we do that deal? And why, we did that deal, and why wouldn't we do that deal?
Because I'm trying to please Tallgrass, and I say, I got the property for 24 million instead of 30.5.
But they weren't interested in that kind of negotiation tactic. They were willing to, they were the ones, the investors were the ones that said, look, there's an appraiser that we know the property, this is low. There are appraisers available, independent appraisers that will say it's worth that amount. They didn't want to go through a lengthy litigation. If anybody recalls, there's a case that just had an expropriation with the St. Bernard port. It just went through litigation, and it finished up about 1.5 years ago. That case went on for 5 years. 5 years of litigation. They didn't want, to them, 4 or 5 million, even if they were a little wrong on that, to them, if they were wrong, that's nothing compared to losing 5 years of time if you're tied up in litigation over an expropriation. And that's what just happened across the river. It went on for that long.
I'm not using St. Bernard as an example. I'm using Plaquemines, and Mr. Alexis bought a piece of property. Y'all messed up on it and didn't buy it before the date. Then we expropriated it from them, right?
We did expropriate it from them, but it was for a lot less money than this $30.5 million.
Money don't matter. We expropriated it, and we didn't give him what he wanted for the property.
It did matter because the port didn't have that kind of money to put up. It did matter. The Alexis, we didn't mess up that, by the way. I'm willing to go back and look at those notes as well. We got it for the price that we needed to get it for, and Mr. Alexis wanted us to pay, I don't know, 5-10 times what he had actually paid for that option. That's what he.
Y'all could have bought it before he bought it. Y'all just,
And we ultimately bought it for the fair market value that we did.
And it was higher.
fair market value for the tall grass property was 24 million.
No, it was 30.5.
'Cause y'all went out and looked for appraisal that'll pay it. But
I'm sorry?
y'all look for an appraisal that would come to that.
I think you're putting the wrong spin on that. I think what we know is that the 24.5 was low, and no one would agree to it. No one would sell it, or it would go for no less than the 30.5 we were able to negotiate for it. And at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, it was a willing buyer, a willing seller, supported by a valid appraisal. If the other appraiser was low and everybody agreed that it was, how would we ever get that deal done? The seller wouldn't sell it for that amount. We could have invited ourselves to that 5-year litigation, hoping that they wouldn't be able to show that it was worth $40 million.
Just to clarify,
All right, thanks.
that piece of property was worth $5 million just about 10 years before?
Say that again?
Just about 10 years before the purchase date, the property was valued at about $5 million.
Well, let's look at the intervening point. In 2011, the people that sold it to the port bought it for $25 million. $25 million. That's what they paid for it in 2011. So if you go from 2011 till when the port bought it in 2018, you know what their return on their investment of $25 million was for what we paid them? 3%. 3% per year. That's all they made off of their investment. That's it. I don't know that it wasn't worth only 5. I know it could have been assessed for $5 million, what you're talking about, but I think it was worth more than that. And we all know, since the port has been active over the last several years, the properties in that area are worth a lot more money, and they're only going to go up as the port develops.
Please, no more appraiser shopping.
We weren't
looks
shopping.
Terrible.
Well, that's what you keep talking.
You asked for policy changes, and I agree with the one that you introduced. I think it's a great idea. Get 2 appraisals, and that's a good step.
And we will bring it to the council, both of them to the council, and say, look, there's a disparity between these. Now, the council may say, get a third one, average them, or we agree with you that it's the smaller one or the higher one.
Julie, you don't have to worry about it. We moved on. Thank you. I yield.
Any other comments from the table? Audience? Machine is open.
Approval of the September 26, 2019 meeting minutes.
That's the end of discussion.
Thank you for that, Mr.
Next item, please.
Number 8, approval of the September 26, 2019 meeting minutes.
I offer, is that second? Second by Mr. Roussel.
Call the question.
Question has been called for. Machine is open.
John?
Okay.
Oh, great.
Motion to adjourn. Second, Councilman Black, I'm sorry. Time, please. Yeah, but what time? Okay, machine open. What time is it? Passes. 8 yes, 1 no. Two. The meeting is adjourned at 2:13.